we are now switching to the group working on microbiome product development and regulatory science. And as you see, with 4 people, I guess Chrysi will talk. So it's my pleasure to welcome Chrysi Sergaki, that most of you probably know already. And she's working at the Medicine and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency. Dr. Kristin Wannerberger from Ferring Pharmaceuticals is not only working as a Director of Research and Development Alliance Management, but she's also our WMP Treasurer. Karine Clement, who is here and already talked about some of her projects, is a professor and working at Inserm and Assistance Publique Hôpitaux de Paris, and Hervé Affagard, I don't know if he's here or online, no. He's a CEO of MaaT Pharma, which is a company with some success on fecal microbiota transfer. Chrysi, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I know I'm the last person separating you from coffee, but I'll make sure to keep you awake. I'm inevitably loud. Chrysi, Sergaki, and I co-lead this working group with Kristin, Karine, and Hervé. Even though we always represent our organizations, we are here to represent the microbiome community, so there will be no logos, no disclaimers, and this will be a very action-oriented presentation. I have been with the UK medicines regulator for the last 6 years, and I have a very unique role that allows me to sit somewhere in between regulation, industry, academia, and the patients and the doctors, and trying to bridge the gap between innovation and regulation. And I have been in countless conversations on the topic, and the common pattern is that huge misunderstandings, uncertainties, lack of consensus, and the very unrealistic and arguably counterproductive expectation from the community that the regulator has to solve all these problems. And I often hear, just tell us what to do, which it sounds crazy to me, because a lot of the issues we come across are fundamentally scientific. And that's why I believe, and we believe, that the microbiome community holds the power to break these barriers, bring products to the market, and bring trust to the microbiome field. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve with this working group. So the aim of this group is to accelerate product development and time to the market by bringing clarity and confidence to the regulatory assessment of microbiome products. We want to create an expert database that regulators can tap into and confidently ask questions about these big issues we have in the field, build consensus and clarify major scientific uncertainties that hinder the regulatory process, and finally bring the regulators to the table so we can have this open conversation. The main gaps we have identified are the major uncertainties and contradictions in the field that are an obstacle to the regulatory process for both regulators and the innovators. And this uncertainty and variability in opinions further enlarges the discrepancies across regulators across the world, making it difficult to move products between markets, and a lack of common place that regulators can refer to for robust and objective scientific information. And that also applies to the public and clinicians that are becoming increasingly aware and interested in the field. So the opportunity we have here is to clarify these major uncertainties and build consensus through white papers, creating evidence-based guides for regulators and innovators, identify gaps that need to be addressed to further accelerate the regulatory process and bring confidence to microbiome products, and create a group of experts across sectors and geographies, that expert database. But for this to happen, and for the regulator to trust that group of experts. We need to ensure representation, objectivity, and lack of conflict of interest. And of course, lastly, there's a lot of work that has been done already by the field, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we rather want to bring all the relevant consensus and white papers from various organizations across the world in one place and categorized so the regulators know where to go and look for this information. So we have broken down the objectives of this working group into 8 categories. First, the PK/PD potency, toxicity, and dosing of medicinal products. Secondly, the safety of microbiome products, both medicinal and non-medicinal. Third, the quality. Fourth, the clinical trials. The health claims for non-medicinal products, microbiome diagnostics, pharmacomicrobiomics, and the regulation of non-human microbiome products. And I'll explain why this is a separate category. So first of all, for the first objective, the PK/PD potency, toxicity, and dosing for medicinal products, we want to list and assess the translatability of its available model and what type of risk assessments should be considered to tackle any limitations of these models, discuss what is considered mode of action, huge topic in the field, and what should regulators look for, particularly if we cannot really describe it. Define what evidence is required or sufficient for a product to proceed to clinical trials, considering the application, the specific context, which preclinical models are enough, and what risk assessment can be used. Moving to the safety of microbiome products, and this concerns both medicinal and non-medicinal products. We want to list and assess perceived versus real risk to safety, because quite a lot of the risks we come across could be perceived, and often we maybe undermine the real risks, and provide a guide that the regulators can use to assess safety for different products, specific population and patient groups, and compositions. The main issues to address here are the risk for infection, effect on other conditions and interventions, and release to the environment. There could be an extra topic on safety assessment of GMO strains and IP issues, and that will depend on the engagement we get from experts in this topic. Additional topics that we could address for non-medicinal products and in collaboration to other the other working groups, is consumer education, particularly for specific patient groups, and better support to healthcare professionals to make decisions on probiotic prescription, if we can call it prescription. And that basically is to translate what all the above that we will do for the regulator, but to be able to communicate it with consumers and healthcare professionals. Thirdly, the quality. We would like to list and assess approaches to demonstrate quality and consistency for different types of products, considering what is relevant for mode of action and what poses a real risk versus perceived risk. We want to discuss how this can be future-proofed, considering how fast it changes. We have changes in technology and classifications of microbes, and consider stability and viability pre- and post-market. For example, we can look into batch-to-batch variability, what is necessary, what is not, what is real risk, what is not. Clinical trials, huge topic here. I couldn't break it down to anything smaller than that, but there's a lot we can do here and bring some science and robust evidence to support how we go about clinical trials, and that, I think, will massively accelerate how many products we get to the market. So we'd like to assess what the standardized design should include without limiting innovation. What do we know so far about necessary metadata, and how can we support the regulator to ensure this is applied and assessed appropriately. We have been discussing a lot about metadata, but we haven't been discussing enough how can we support the regulator to look and interpret this metadata, understand what is enough and what does it mean for the data they're looking at. How can we address the challenge of diet and other environmental factors and support the regulator in understanding its true impact on the trial result? Again, something that we all know it's super important, but how much effort have we put into explaining to the regulator why and how exactly can they go into assessing that? List and assess different biomarkers that can be used to support such clinical trials, and again, how the regulator can assess that the use of such biomarkers and how much we can trust them. Discuss patient stratification, assess which population would demonstrate best efficacy. We all know the issues we have with efficacy and how the individual effect that products have on different populations. So we need to start thinking differently about clinical trials. How can we help the regulators be confident about distinguishing when microbiome as primary endpoint is used appropriately and based on robust scientific evidence? And of course, how can they assess it? Very loaded point, I know, but I think having microbiome as primary endpoint has been a huge conversation, but we haven't equipped the regulators appropriately with robust scientific evidence to help them assess such information. And finally, signposting to the regulator what additional testing will be conducted upon a market release to tighten profiles regarding lifestyle and genetic influences. Moving to non-medicinal products and the health claims, huge issue in bringing non-medicinal products to the market. So we need to create consensus on how we should approach health claims for all types of products, live, dead, pre, post-biotics, focusing on how we assess their effect on health. That's what health claims are, and that can support regulators across the world understand how we need to think about microbiome products. Moving to microbiome diagnostics, again, something that has raised a lot of interest the last couple of years. We need to address the lack of clinically validated microbiome-based diagnostic tools with proven added value for patient care. We have an urgent need for a reliable and comprehensive knowledge base for it to work. So we would like to propose a suitable design for fit-for-purpose clinical trials assessing real-world utility and clinical evidence of such products. For example, treatment stratification and specific cares versus usual care or prognostic value, and suggest how this could be utilized for decision-making in hospital. And that will allow to really make the most of microbiome research and potential. Pharmacomicrobiomics. I really believe into pharmacomicrobiomics, and I think this topic will revolutionize health and will enable personalized medicine. However, we need to consider how can we support pharma to incorporate microbiome analysis in their drug development journey, focusing perhaps on microbiome effects as an off-target effect of drugs. How can we assess the microbiotoxicity of drugs and its effect on AMR burden? How can we support the regulator to assess the data? Because it's one to figure out, okay, how do we go about that regarding the product development, but then how can the regulator look at this data and confidently assess them? And discuss how microbiome products can be positioned for combination therapy, how studies should be designed, and how regulators should assess the evidence. And that is of particular interest considering that there are food supplements that can be used and have been used with success to support therapies. But then how can the regulator go about assessing them? And finally, the regulation of non-human microbiome products. You can see that we have a lot to do here. So we thought that the best approach to tackle this would be to connect with working groups focusing on non-human microbiome and discuss how all this work that we will do for human-based products can support the regulation of non-human products, because many of the methods and the concepts that we will address with all these objectives are the same and or easily transferable to other fields. So to summarize, we propose a science-focused approach to supporting the regulatory process, clarifying the rationale behind choice of technology, interpretation of results, and a risk-based approach to assessment to accelerate innovation and the regulatory process. And we need and we want to create a well-rounded, comprehensive, and objective source of information for the regulators to support and accelerate their processes based on robust scientific evidence that will bring confidence to the field. And of course, as we do that, we will identify priorities and gaps that we still need to address as a field. So I would like to call all of you to be part of this working group, part of this expert database that we want to build and bring trust to the microbiome field and products to the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chrysi, to you and your colleagues and collaborators. I think you partially answer a question we have through Zoom, which is the regulatory session is focused on the human microbiome. Would it be a regulatory framework for plants and animals? So I guess you're calling for, but maybe you won't.
Yes, so my career started from environmental, actually, and plant and soil microbiome. So I understand the limitations there, and I know the difficulties there as well. And I think a lot of these things that we will tackle can be transferable. But of course, I think the best use of everyone will be to take the learnings from the previous objectives and see what else do we need to tackle and align with what the specific groups need. And I think there won't be as many gaps as we would think. Okay. But I'm open to suggestions, obviously.
Yeah. Yes?
There is an extension on the same idea. The question is how any plans, or is there any plan to bring together regulators from humans, animals, and plants to discuss how a single document, maybe a single approach, can have different effects depending on the system, or a single product? Yeah, a single product can have the same question different.
It's a follow-up of the first question.
I think let's create the expert database. Let's bring confidence to this expert database. And I think the regulators would love to engage and talk more about how they can. I think this is the easiest part, if you ask me, to have the regulators speak to each other rather than the community and the regulators to come together.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Kristin?
Can I just comment? Because we discussed that we need to definitely bring together the food, the EFSA in Europe, at least the EFSA and the EMA for discussion on the human, and so it's pointing in that direction to try to kind of get the regulators together from different kind of authorities.
Is there?
Yes. So yes, what Kristin is suggesting is that, of course, one of the things we want to achieve with this working group is not just to bring to create that expert group, but actually make sure we can bring the different regulators to the table. And when I speak about risk-based assessment and all these things, we need to have the regulators telling us, does that make sense for you? Is what we're developing making sense for you? And we can sort out the scientific part, but can that align with your processes? So the dialogue between the group, the experts, the community, and the regulators will start. We want to start it as early as possible. So yes, we want to bring them together. Now, the question of talking between the human and non-human, I think that will come very easily after that.
Another one on Zoom asking, can change of the gut microbiome become an outcome for assessing products?
I think this is something we have to decide, right? This is one of the things we need to clarify. And isn't it crazy that we still cannot give a straight answer to that, but we expect the regulators to have an answer. But yes, we will answer that, hopefully.
Yeah. Yes.
Just one comment talking about just probiotic, prebiotic, postbiotic. It will be already super challenging just to address this point worldwide, knowing that just, for example, one strain can be authorized in one country and not in many others, while this is presumed to be safe. So I think there are already many organizations playing in that space, trying to convince the regulators. So I think the need is to have a unified and single voice. Otherwise, each association is coming to the regulator and defending sometimes some interests, some others, not always based on science, to be transparent. So there is an absolutely need, and maybe to use one key market as a use case, and then after to roll out, and maybe not start by the EU because they are not super open.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's where really this idea came from, that has been quite frustrating for different groups to try to do this alone. So, and I personally believe there is power, as I said, for if the community comes together and makes a decision based on data, on evidence, on scientific evidence. And if a whole scientific community comes up with a consensus, the regulators will not ignore it. And particularly if that's in collaboration with the regulators, understanding their processes and their point of view, I think that's how we can make something productive. We can actually bring a solution. And we may not have all the answers like next year, but I think it would be a great start coming all together to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, yes, to build on this question, I think there is also a question of whether you consider some geographic area or the different regulatory framework across the world. And the fact also that in some countries there is no regulatory framework for those kind of products. So do you consider those challenges also?
There are not many well-defined regulatory frameworks specifically for microbiome products, and that's a huge opportunity. And that's why I have been communicating with the community for all these years. Stop asking for regulation around the microbiome because we are not ready. We are not ready to have a legislation. It will limit the information. It will stop innovation if we have regulation. So the fact that we don't have a very detailed and well-defined regulatory framework for such products is the opportunity to support how this is developed and create something that is science-based. And when it's science-based, it can very easily be applied across the world and across markets and bring confidence to the regulators across the world that they're doing the right thing, science-based decisions.
Thank you. One last question. I think you have to switch on the mic.
It's excellent. I think for most microbiome products, there already exist procedures which allows registration and controls, like starting with plant stimulants up to novel food regulations. Yeah, most of them are not adapted to microbiome survey. Yeah, but usually they exist on a different level.
Yes, and I think that's still an opportunity, the fact that it's still there. It's an opportunity for us to shape it based on scientific evidence. Yes.
Thank you very much, Chrysi and collaborators.